Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar around the EN requirements that go beyond WCAG. It is now 3 o'clock, and I know that we have a very dense agenda today, so I will start even if people are coming in. So this webinar is automatically captioned. Please use the CC function in Zoom. We are also recording it, and the recording will be on the IAAP EU YouTube channel afterwards. If you would like to ask a question to today's speakers, please use the Q&A function. You are helping me a lot. There is also a chat. But if you put your questions in the chat, it's harder for me to catch them. So please do use the Q&A function. And if we do get a lot of questions, we sometimes have the time to respond to them afterwards. We will try our best to respond during today's session. And your camera and microphone have been disabled to avoid any distractions, but there is a possibility to ask questions verbally. So please use the raise hand functionality if that would be of your preference. We have a distinguished panel of speakers today. We have Hidde de Vries from Logius in the Netherlands. We have Malin Hammarberg, who is working at the Funka Foundation, and also Peter Kemen from the Funka Foundation, Shadi Abuzara, who everyone knows, I guess, in the accessibility world, who is nowadays with Amazon, and myself. My name is Susanna Lorin. I am here as the IAAP EU representative to the EU. And I'm just doing a little intro and outro today, and also moderating the questions. So the experts are the actual speakers of today. So we have a short agenda, but dense, as I said. So we are now at the welcome and the housekeeping part. I will talk very slightly about the background of these workshops that this is the result of that we are presenting today. And then my colleagues will present 4 of the requirements that we have been working with in the last, on the 24th of April. And with each of the requirement that we present, there will be a short Q&A function so that you remember what you actually heard when you ask your questions. And then we will talk a little bit about how you can contribute when we end up. And in the agenda, we have upcoming events, but we don't really have dates for the next workshop. So that may be a little bit of a false marketing from my side. Sorry about that. This whole series of workshops came about because we understand, we, meaning the whole community, knows that there are requirements in the EN301549, which all the EU legislation is based on, that go kind of beyond WCAG, who do not reference or point to WCAG requirements. And of course, the WCAG requirements are good in many ways, and especially because they have understanding documentation and how to meet documentation and so on and so forth. So there's really a lot of information on top of, or as in-depth information to go with each of the success criteria. But these European requirements that go beyond WCAG, and when we say beyond WCAG, we don't mean the ones that cover hardware or other things, but also websites and apps. Going beyond WCAG, there are more than 60 requirements already in the existing legislation, the Web Accessibility Directive, that do not point to WCAG requirements. And this has led to a little bit of confusion. Many, both monitoring agencies and experts, do not really know how to interpret these requirements and when they are applicable and how they are to be tested. And we have seen that monitoring agencies in different member states have been interpreting them in different way, testing them in different way. And then, of course, this leads to fragmentation and frustration. And many of the accessibility experts that work in more than one country really dislike this thing. And the whole idea with this legislation and the standard is harmonization. So we think we need to get together and decide what is actually meant with all of these requirements. So, and we also see already today with the current legislation and the current monitoring system that we have differences between countries, and with the European Accessibility Act, well, chances are that this will be even worse, of course, in the future. So from IAAP point of view, and especially the EU program of IAAP, we thought we need to try to work together to kind of bridge this gap and do something that everyone could benefit from. So we initiated these workshops a couple of years ago, where we meet with end users with disabilities, accessibility subject matter experts, monitoring agencies, policymakers, other stakeholders to spend time together as volunteers in workshop format and discuss how do we do it, what do we think, what is useful, what is difficult here, how should it be better. And the goal is to finally come up with some kind of formal document that we hope to be able to present as part of the European standardization ecosystem. We haven't really been successful with that yet, but I still hope that there is a place for it. And the idea is not to have this IAAP branded or closed or any other other community only, but really open to everyone, and of course free of charge. So that is the whole point, to make sure that everyone can contribute and everyone can also use this. So anything you hear of today or use today, then please make sure to spread it on to others as well. And I also want to say that we are working closely together with a special task force. So Shadi is in the task force, and many of the others from in this little core group, we are also in the joint technical body. So we are in the standardization, and we are making sure that the things that we decide on or agree on, or the conclusions from these workshops, are also fed into the standardization work in different ways. And at the last workshop, we didn't have Mike Pluk with us, but he has been working together with us with these workshops during many of the workshops. And now we have only kind of delivered the results to him. And we have already seen that quite a few things have been updated in the current update work and review that is happening already. So we are making progress, we are having great fun, and we are, I think, supporting many different stakeholders by this work, and we're also having an impact slowly on the standards and the standardization. So I do not see any questions around this, so we will just present you with the interim results from what we have discussed at the last workshop. And this is requirement 722, audio description synchronization.
Hello, can you see me and hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So hi, I'm Peter Cumming, and I'll talk about the beautiful topic of audio description, and in the topic of audio description, about audio description synchronization. So criteria 722 says that, please change, thank you, that where ICT has a mechanism to play audio description, it shall preserve the synchronization between the audio-visual content and the corresponding audio description. So just to break it down a bit, it talks about ICT that obviously plays video or shows video, and that is able to play audio description. And the key word maybe is preserve, that it's about preserving the synchronization. It's not about the quality of the audio description itself. It's about making sure that if you have an audio description for a video, then the originally planned synchronization is kept by the player. So why is this important? First of all, just shortly, what is audio description? Because maybe not everybody is aware. Audio description is basically narration added to the soundtrack of a video to describe important visual details that cannot be understood only from the main soundtrack, so only from the sound alone. So this is obviously important for people who cannot see or cannot see well. So even the standard has them in a primary user group, blind people and visually impaired people. But beyond what is mentioned in the standard, we would also say that for people who are colorblind, it is also it can be an important thing if that important information that cannot be understood from the text or from the sound has to do with colors, for example, color marked. but it can be also useful for everybody if they are in a situation where they cannot properly see the screen, for example. So that's kind of the visual group. Another group or user need is those who are unable to understand well everything on the screen. In the standard, the users with cognitive impairment is mentioned, but here as well, you can be in a situation where you're under stress or everything is noisy and you need audio description is helpful to understand what's going on. And it can be also cultural details that the audio description can provide for you to understand better the video content. So what is the problem or what are the problematic areas of audio description synchronization? First of all, the synchronization issues can come from the player and maybe the content. So the audio description itself is not well done. And so that's one of the main problems, how you know if it's not working well, if it's the player or it's a bad audio description. Then more and more we meet with live streaming or AI-generated captions and audio descriptions. There it can be a bit difficult to fulfill this requirement to make sure that the ICT, so the video player, for example, can influence or 100% the synchronization. It raises the question, for example, in live streaming, if it is required actually from a video player that it buffers the incoming data, incoming stream, so it can synchronize properly the audio description to the video. And then another thing I mentioned, video player, but it can go beyond video player. The requirement mentions ICT, and so it can be also video games or other interactive content where audio description is useful. Another topic, these are the problems we didn't really find answers, so then the next slide I can give you answers as well. There's the normal audio description, so to say, when the audio description fits in the pauses of the sound, and there's an extended audio description where more time is needed and the video is stopped. There the question is if it could be or should be required from a video player to actually be guided by the audio description, so to stop when it's necessary itself, or it needs to be provided always in a different soundtrack where the soundtrack and the audio description comes together. So these are the interesting areas we couldn't really find answer to, but we could find answer to some questions. Next slide, please. First, the focus of the requirement is definitely the player. It is not the content. So that's what needs to be tested if you want to fulfill this requirement. An interesting question, if you have a website which has videos on it, but none of them need audio description, then if it's still necessary to check if it's still necessary that your video player fulfills this requirement, and we went with the answer that yes, it's still necessary because you might need audio description in the future, and the verbatim interpretation of the requirement actually doesn't talk about having audio description at all, which might be strange. And finally, how to test it. And I'm very proud that our little team came up with an interesting solution, something we borrowed from testing ebooks. To make sure to get rid of the uncertainty of is it the player, is it the audio description, we suggest to test it with test files played by the video player and checking if the markers meet up. And the test method is to initiate it from a certain reading location, then stop and resume to that location and see if it's still in synchron. Jump to a bookmark if there's a bookmark, change speed if that's possible and see if it's still in synchron, and then as last step initiate from a reading location somewhere at the end to make sure that there's no frequency problems. So we kind of got a whole spectrum of this requirement. And this is the gist of it, and my time is up as well. So are there any questions about audio description, synchronization, the testing method, or anything else related?
So thank you, Peter. Perfect timing. So we have one question here. If you offer a video as a download below the player, does the player then still need to fulfill the criterion?
Yes, I mean it. If I understand well the question, the criterion requires that the ICT, so the video player, can synchronize these tracks. It doesn't matter from this perspective if it's streamed or if it's downloaded, and you play a downloaded video afterwards. But you need to download everything you need. So also, if it's necessary to download separately, also the audio description track.
Thank you. And the next question is, how could this test be automated?
That's a very good question. Well, I don't have the technical knowledge for that, but so the good thing with this test that it doesn't depend on external factors. So if there's a technical way to create markups in the video, somehow digital markups, and also in the audio description, then I think it could be possible that that a tool can check if these two are lined up.
Okay, or we need another workshop to talk about the automatic testing. That's another. Okay, and the next question is, what about audio description for videos without gaps to insert descriptions? I understand that it's covered by extended description, but what is a WCAG AAA requirement? But that is a WCAG AAA requirement.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the approach there is that actually videos should already be prepared in a way that if they need audio description, then they should leave some space to it. Maybe that's a bit utopistic, but also there are other ways where you can provide there's solutions that you might not need audio description. So you can use sound ambience, for example, when people are outside in the nature, then you put some birds chirping. Already it should be done during the production of the video. So if you have the holistic approach, then you might be able to solve it. The other possibility is to provide a text alternative if that is enough.
Okay, thank you. And then in the chat we have, is there requirement to have possibility to turn off audio description?
I think there is that you have to be able to turn on and off. What we didn't find a requirement about is the quality of audio description, that it should be good and it should fit in those pauses that are available. So that would be also necessary in the opinion of the little team who processed this requirement. But I have to check that. I don't remember well because I also treated captions before and they are very similar. So I will need to check that.
And easy to mix up. So we only have 1 minute left, but too many questions. So I take this one. What is meant with using a test file in the player? If I'm testing for someone, I do not have a possibility to integrate a test file.
Yeah, so that we came up with two ways of doing it. One is that the tested party uploads it for you, or if there's a possibility a test environment, or it's open to the public, then you might be able to upload it. For example, on YouTube, you have the possibility to upload the test file. Yeah, if it's official audit, then required by the law, for example, then the audited party has to give permission or provide a solution for that, in my opinion.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. So we have some questions left, but we'll see if we can get back to them in the end of the webinar or in writing afterwards. So now we go to 11. Thank you very much, Peter. To 11.6.2, no disruption of accessibility features. Malin.
Hi, thank you. I hope you can see me as well.
Yes.
So if we move to the requirement, we'll start with that one. So it says where software provides a user interface, it shall not disrupt those documented accessibility features that are defined in platform documentation, except when requested to do so by the users during operation of the software. That's a long sentence. And in Annex A, we can also read that the requirement, it's only set as a requirement for software, that is mobile applications, for example. And the condition is where ICT is non-web software that provides a user interface. So what does all this mean? Well, it means that non-web software, like a non-web mobile app, that would be a native app, should not interfere with the built-in accessibility feature that is documented as accessibility features by the platform. That would be the OS, like iOS or Android, unless the user has specifically chosen to change them. So I think one thing we talked about in the workshop was that it's important to note that this is older version. This standard was written a long time ago when apps wasn't so developed. So the way it's written now is that it's required for native apps, possibly hybrid apps, but in the definition then non-web apps and also websites are excluded, of course. So this might not really reflect the user needs, but we will talk more about that later on. To give an example when this would fail, to make it even more clearer, so figure out what is it when something is disrupted. It's not really defined, but we thought it is disrupted when the interface blocks a feature or overrides it without the user consent or makes the user redo the settings within the app. So if a user uses voice control and the app starts recording audio automatically, then it disrupts the user's possibility to continue using voice control, and that would be fail on this one. So that's an assistive technology. That's one of those things that's added as accessibility features. But as accessibility features in iOS and Android, they also list things like changing the font size, dark mode, reduce motion. So for instance, if a user uses dark mode because they might have epilepsy or migraine or something, and they prefer dark mode, or they have low vision, and it's listed as accessibility feature in the platform documentation. It should mean that if a user uses dark mode and opens the app, and the app first starts in light mode, even if that is possible to have in dark mode, and forces the users to redo the settings within the app, then that should also be a fail to this one, as far as we can tell. So who is this important for? Of course, it's important for all user groups, all users who use some kind of accessibility feature or assistive technology. And it pretty much covers all groups, because all user groups can use some type of accessibility feature, right? So user with vision impairment can use screen readers, braille, keyboards, magnification, high contrast, or dark mode. Users with hearing impairment, they can use like live captions or visual alerts. Users with motor impairments might use voice control, switch access, or one-handed mode. Users with cognitive impairments might use text-to-speech, dictation, or reduced motion. User with photosensitivity who depends on reduced motion or dark mode can use it for lessen the risk of seizures. So all the groups should be covered, but in Appendix B, only some groups are covered and some groups are not even mentioned. So we think more groups should be covered all the groups should be covered, because we can, or there are so many different types of assistive technology for each of these user groups. So what is the problem? Well, even if the requirement is kind of straightforward, they say look in the documentation for the platform to see what features, and the features are very nicely listed there when we went into each of the different platforms' accessibility feature to check them. But we started discussing, is it the platform's accessibility feature? Is that the OS, for instance, iOS or Android, or should we look at the manufacturer's accessibility features, like the ones who create, for instance, the phone, like Samsung or HTC, or should we look in the computer's definition of what their accessibility feature is, like Lenovo, IBM, and so on? So that might be a confusion. Also, website and web apps, as I said, and partially hybrid apps are excluded since it's defined as its non-web interfaces, and these all combine some parts of web. So this should probably be looked over to make sure it really brings that accessibility that we need. And it's also technically possible for both websites and web apps to follow some of these settings. We also saw it as a risk if they exclude web apps, but native apps need to make sure that this works. Then there's added requirements on native apps that might make people take that into account when they choose if they want to do a web app or a native app. And native apps usually can be made more accessible, so that would be something sad if this requirement kind of pushes in that direction. There is also a bit of unclear wording in the Annex C, and they add the term if it's confirmed by the user, but in the requirement it says requested by the user. And this is a different term, so we discussed the ambiguity of using different terms in the clause and the testing annex. So we think it should be looked over. It also overlaps with a lot of WCAG criteria. And another clause, the 11.7 user preferences. I think I have more on that on next slide. And we also thought that the lack of examples, if we added examples like the ones I took, like what are fails and what are possible gray areas and so on, then it's easier for the tester to test and understand what they should test inside this criteria. And the next, so it overlaps with 11.7 user preferences. So user preferences is a bit more fussy criteria where they say, kind of listen to the user preferences. How does this differ from this criteria? We think it differs in the way that it doesn't kind of force the user to add a dark mode, but if the app has a dark mode, for instance, and the user has set dark mode, then the app should be turned on in dark mode. Otherwise, it disrupts that user setting. But it doesn't force the app to have a dark mode, maybe. And then we had several WCAG criteria which it's kind of interferes with or is close to. So I listed some here, it doesn't say that much, but for instance, if a user has increased the font size, but the app doesn't listen to that and force the user to do the font size settings inside the app, then that would fail this criteria, we think, because that's a disruption. But it also should fail 1.4.4 resize text, or even maybe 11.7 user preferences. Voice control disrupted by automatic audio recording, as I mentioned before. It could possibly also fail WCAG 2.1.2 keyboard trap. Or if we have auto-playing media that disrupts the screen reader, that could also fail WCAG 1.4.2 audio control or 2.2.2 pause, stop, hide. So there's a list of those kind of fussy things where we're not sure, and a clear guidance, what should be tested where, should actually help the tester a lot. What belongs here and what belongs to these other parts. And we also thought that Annex B should have the full range of affected users and not just a few. We talked about Annex A should also include web apps and hybrid apps, and possibly also websites, because website has the possibility in CSS to listen to a lot of those user accessibility features. They have the possibility to listen if the user has set dark mode. They have the possibility to listen to if they have set reduced motion. But the websites not always do that because they have no requirement to do that. So we thought it would be nice to either create a similar requirement for websites as this one. And Annex C, unify it with the requirement, so it does not say requested or confirmed in Annex C, but reflects the wording in the requirement. So there's no confusion, because we thought confirmation is a very vague thing. Is it okay to say, we will disrupt all your accessibility feature, push OK? Doesn't feel really so nice. I think that was all.
Thank you, Malin. You were the one setting the times for this, and you broke your own rules, so you would only have 1 minute for the questions. I'm sorry. So we have a question about the unclarity. Is this requirement applicable to native apps? And if not, what requirements should app testers be using?
This is definitely applicable to native apps, and it's for all the accessibility features documented in iOS and Android, as far as we can tell. So it's text size, it's dark mode, it's reduced motion, it's all the assistive technology like switch access, voice control, and so on.
Okay, thank you very much. We will have to get back to the questions in writing and get on to the next one. So thank you very much, Malin, for this walkthrough. And we will now talk about 1184 for Hide.
Yeah, thank you, Susanna. This one is about repair assistance offered by authoring tools. Important to note that it is 11.8.4 right now. It is likely going to be moved to clause 5. So it's going to be in 5.10.4 as it's in the current latest draft of the EN. The criterion is about if the accessibility checking functionality of an authoring tool can detect that content does not meet the requirement of the clauses 9 or 10 as applicable, then the authoring tool shall provide repair suggestions. So it's basically about authoring tools like CMSs, LMSs, social media, anything that makes content. It can make content that violates clause 9 or clause 10. And these tools could, if they wanted to, automatically find out about these problems in certain cases. And this clause says if they are able to do that, if they have that ability, then they should also come up with suggestions. And then there's a note, this does not preclude automated and semi-automated repair, which is possible and encouraged for many types of content accessibility problems. Next slide, please. So this is really important. We talked a bit in the group about the different groups of people that it would be important for, right? In Annex B, there's a number of different users mentioned, and we agree with all of those. So we agree that this clause is important for users with limited vision, without perception of color, without or with limited hearing, with limited manipulation or strength. So all of these groups it does definitely apply to, but we also felt that it applies a lot to procurers, so people who are making purchasing decisions about authoring tools, because this clause helps them to find the ones that are going to help their organization most with their accessibility journey. It's good for authoring tool makers as well, because they now have a great idea for better functionality within their tool. And of course, it's good for users of authoring tools as well, including users with disabilities. So imagine someone with a disability wants to create content. The content has accessibility problems. The tool can tell them about it. So for instance, if the problem was a color contrast issue, someone who is blind would not be able to see that. But if their tool would tell them about it, they would still be able to fix it. So it's a it's a world of opportunities there to make these tools better and more suitable for fixing accessibility problems in content. And what's specifically really interesting about that is that you're fixing problems at sort of the earliest stage that you could possibly fix them on. A lot of accessibility problems are fixed when they are found, and that happens sometimes after a website has shipped. But what if you can find them like right when you're creating the content? That's kind of the earliest stage you could probably do it at, and that's great. Next slide, please. So the problem, a couple of problems that we found. The first one is the definition of an authoring tool. We thought that there were a lot more authoring tools than people kind of realize that there are. Some people might be selling an authoring tool without realizing that they are in this category of the EN. Some people might be using authoring tools all day and not realize that they are. Like if you post a comment on a discussion online, you're creating content, and that is an authoring tool. And there's lots of different cases. Another problem with the definition that we found is that there's a bit of confusion around whether this is about tools that are capable of doing this thing, and the clause applies to those tools, or that it is a more general thing of if we as a sector are able to detect these issues, should the tool already be doing that? And the answer to that problem is that currently, as it is written in the EN, this is about tools that already have the checking capabilities. Then the third issue we found is that we didn't really agree about which issues can be detected. That's an industry-wide problem. Depends on who you ask. What they will tell you is detectable. There are companies that say they can detect 100% of accessibility problems, and there are some that say it's like 10 or 20%, and there's a lot of people in between. So the amount of detectable issues varies depending on who you ask. And then the last one is the nature of the suggestions. There are ways to do good suggestions and kind of worse ways to do the suggestions as well. And then the next slide will have some potential solutions. Our first suggestion was to add a range of examples to the definition of authoring tool. And that would help people find out, oh, wait, this is my tool. I have a tool that falls in this category, and shows kind of the range of authoring tools. That one we've sent to the editor of the specification, and they've already updated that in the latest draft. Second suggestion, to use the word capable instead of can to clarify what I was talking about earlier. If it's about, are they capable of doing this in a tool, or would they be capable of it if they tried? So that clarification has also been added. And then the third suggestion that we had was to add an extra clause potentially to actually require detection. Because as an industry, we know color contrast can be automatically detected in most cases. So why not require every single authoring tool to actually do that? That's a more controversial one because it would also require a lot of work on the behalf of authoring tools, right? It will cost them a lot of effort potentially to implement all that. But we kind of started that discussion in a issue on the EN GitLab. So yeah, if you find that interesting, you can look at it there as well. And that's all I had. Open for questions if I still have time.
Thank you very much. So I was thinking, if we require of all authoring tools to put in some of the kind of easy checks that we know can be done, and at the same time define authoring tools as every field you can fill something into, isn't it easier to push for those kind of requirements on kind of the real industry, the big companies that do what many people would think about as an authoring tool, the content management systems and so on? I mean, aren't we kind of going in two directions at one here?
I guess we're making the problem huge if we do that. Yeah, that's a great point. I think we could potentially, we would have to update the definition of authoring tool to maybe be more narrow before we did that. Or that new requirement would maybe be more narrow. So be something like, if it is an authoring tool that does these and these things, then it should provide suggestions. If it makes websites, because websites are easy to define, right?
Yeah, true. So you must have been extremely clear because we haven't got any questions around this. So just wait a second for people to wrap their heads around all of this. So I know you have been working quite a lot on this before with authoring tools and trying to make sure that we kind of shift the whole thing left. But do you see an increase in kind of the automation or born accessible or even by default, all of these projects do you see that happening in the industry as a whole, or do you think that we're still far away from automation and kind of by default accessibility in the authoring tools? What's your view on that? I guess you are still, even if you're not working exactly with that right now, I think you are at least among us, you are the one who have most knowledge about what is happening in the industry.
Yeah, I actually wanted to mention that at the start. Like, there are a number of different tools that do some of this already. Like, there's a CMS that will tell you if you have a color contrast problem. There's a CMS that will give you information about your content that you've created. There are also like more sort of academic projects happening. Like at the Dutch government, there's a group of people working on, can we potentially define some CMS detectable issues and open source that kind of, and then help these vendors to build in this kind of stuff. I had nothing to do with that, by the way. There are definitely tools that are doing this. It is still somewhat niche though. So maybe that's also one of the things we can take away from this, is that even if it's not a requirement in the end, it's still worthwhile to try and push for this. If you're buying a CMS, ask the vendor what they can do for you in terms of accessibility automation, especially if it's a CMS that can script a lot, where like developers can do whatever they want. There are a lot of CMSs out there today that sell themselves as like, you can change it in however way you want. So you can also turn your CMS into an accessibility assistant that way.
Yep. So we have one question here, not exactly about this, but who is responsible for accessible content, the CMS tool or a website owner who used that CMS tool to produce the content?
I'd say it's the website owner, but if they're smart, they'll make sure their tool helps them with it. So it's a bit of a two-sided problem, but I guess the end responsibility will always be with the website owner. It just depends on kind of how much they want to optimize that, if they want to do it manually or if they want to leverage the tools that they have available to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely from a legal standpoint, it's very clear that it's the website owner, because otherwise it would be like I upload an inaccessible PDF and then I blame Adobe for that. I mean, it's not, I don't think we can make them responsible for it, even if they kind of should. So my last question to you would be, I mean, historically, people have kind of known WCAG, and in the EU, maybe known EN301549 and so on. But do people normally, I mean, in the CMS or authoring tool business, do they look at ATAG? Is that kind of a thing in that industry, or is it still very much less known than the kind of ordinary accessibility standards? What do you say?
It's definitely less known than WCAG, but that's also because WCAG is very known, and there are a lot of standards that are less known than that. There are a couple of CMSs that talk about ATAG on their website, like Drupal does. I think Joomla does as well. But they are in a minority at the moment. It would be great to see more people, because there's a lot of very good advice in that standard, especially around this as well. Like the whole, like half of ATAG, the B side of it, is full of tips around helping authors to do a better job. So it's basically, his criterion is basically ATAG B in one short sentence. But yeah, there's a lot of good information there. So if anyone is working on a CMS or working with CMS people, do point them at that. I would recommend that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Hidde. We have to move on to the last one for today, 12.2.2. If we can have Shadi, yes.
So hi everyone. Yeah, it was great to have this discussion, Bruno. this requirement is particularly interesting because there is actually a standard being created on so-called support services currently being worked on. So this is where the EN301549 overlaps with that standard to be developed. So this was on requirement 12.2.2 called Information on Accessibility and Compatibility Features. And so the requirement itself reads, ICT support services shall provide information on the accessibility and compatibility features that are mentioned in the product documentation. So I just want to point out here terms like support services, provide information, accessibility features, compatibility features, mentioned, and product documentation. This is my highlighting, right? There's also a note in that requirement, and the note reads, accessibility and compatibility features include accessibility features that are built in and accessibility features that provide compatibility with assistive technology. Good, so that's the requirement as itself. When we move on to, when we started looking at that, at who is it's important for, that was a bit of the easier part of the discussion because this basically applies to anyone. It really depends on what the accessibility and compatibility features are provided by the particular website or application or something. So for example, if it's an application that plays audio, for example, accessibility and compatibility features might relate to audio, might relate to people with hearing disabilities, for example. It could be keyboard controls for people who have mobility impairments or people with visual disabilities, etc. So it really is, doesn't have a specific cohort in mind. But we also thought that it's actually particularly important when something doesn't work as expected, on when there's incompatibility. For example, you are navigating the website by a keyboard, and suddenly the website is using different keyboard combinations, different keyboard controls than what's usually used, and that might create an unexpected behavior, and suddenly it's like, okay, I'm not exactly sure what's happening here. Or it's not compatible with your screen reader or whatever assistive technology you're using, and you're unsure, is that a bug or a feature? Is that something because certain browsers are not used anymore, or is it because there's a bug in the code? So this is a point that we'll come back to later on about incompatibility and expected behavior as well. But let's move on. We started analyzing then the exact, like, what is the problem with this requirement itself? And one came out, it's unclear really to what degree the term support services, which is not really defined, includes online and self-service documentation. So very simple help pages, for example, you have a help page online. Is that a support service, or is that part of the service itself, part of the website? What about AI services like a chatbot, for example? But even a call center, you might call a number, and it's not a human who answers, but a chatbot, or also like an AI-driven response. And so it's unclear if support services. My take is that this requirement, when it was written, it was focusing quite strongly on traditional calling customer support and talking with a customer support agent. But now we have so many more ways of having support that it's unclear how it really applies to that. It's also unclear to what degree so-called first-line support versus specialized support services. This is in particular when you are actually calling customer support. You might have first-line support, customer support agents. You might have specialized agents who specifically know how to deal with accessibility questions, like how do I turn on the screen reader in this product, or what are the accessibility features specifically, or things like that, especially when products get more complicated. But there could also be situations where you know, there's a whole chain of things. For example, I run a website, but part of the website is, say, a third-party product or an integrated product. I don't know, a CMS tool, because we were talking about content management systems. And so maybe the first support, customer support redirects the customer to another customer support of that CMS of that content management system to talk about the specific accessibility features of that part of the website? Or does it all have to be, you know, the same person who is able to handle all questions? Is such a redirecting, is such a redirection acceptable? And how many redirections? You don't want to be sent in circles forever, right? You want to be helped. And finally, it's unclear also how complete and extensive should these accessibility features and compatibility features, how extensive should they be documented and provided to the customer ultimately? So the requirement actually said the word mentioned. It doesn't say all. So first of all, it doesn't say what exactly should be documented. So does every single accessibility feature need to be mentioned? Do I need to list every single browser and version of the browser and in every language? And combinations of browsers and assistive technologies that my website works with, or only specific things like if I know I'm not supporting browser X, for example. Or things, accessibility features, do I need to say this works with screen reader and this does the or only things are exceptional, like which keyboard shortcuts have I specifically programmed? You know, things that are specific to that particular website or application. So that's not really clear, but it's also unclear how much the support agent or the support service is supposed. So even if that's all documented, do support agents, we assume that it's all features that are documented need to be communicated to customers, but that's not really clear in the requirement itself. It doesn't say the word all. So let's move on to the next slide and about quick questions and potential solutions. We actually have many more, and there's going to be more in the write-up. I just didn't want to fill a slide or multiple slides, but basically the main point I think is about better defining some of the terms and terminology. That's why I was highlighting them at the beginning of my input, is to try to have different considerations for things like compatibility features. Could include aspects also of incompatibility, known issues. So I know this website does not support browser X and Y. That is something that is maybe more important to say than, or it might be, you know, it's part of, so not only what's compatible, but also what's incompatible. Non-standard or unexpected behavior. I mentioned an example of keyboard shortcuts several times. Interference with assistive technologies, like when you turn on the media player, it will turn off, or will I don't know, it will interfere with whatever, with your magnifier, for example. And finally, somebody also in the group came up with a really important thing about regional differences on accessibility features based on languages. For example, the keyboard shortcuts might be different in different languages because just, for example, P for print in English and D for Druck in German, the German word for print. So you already here have different language variances that might actually impact the accessibility features. And again, the requirement doesn't really talk much about which languages and how to support. And again, does the same customer support agent need to know all the shortcuts in all languages? That could quite complicated. So that's kind of nutshell of the discussion that we had with a really great group in Brno. Any questions?
Thank you, Shadi. We have a question about in-person support and in-person support and services. Is that, I guess the question is that covered by this?
That is a good question. Actually, I don't recall we actually talked about that specifically, but it's not excluded because the definition doesn't actually exclude in-person support. I have yet to see. I mean, I can imagine in-person support in many situations when I go to the airport or whatever. But for websites, and web apps, it's less common. But potentially, you might have, I don't know, say an application in a library and something, and there's an in-person support helping you use that computer or something, or that particular website to search for the books or something. So it's imaginable, but we didn't really talk about that use case much. But I don't see it being excluded from the definition. That's part of what I was saying. It's really unclear what exactly the scope is.
Yeah, true. And in the European Accessibility Act, it's also not really defined whether it needs to be in person or online or whatever. So yeah, so the next question is, for instance, if you are selling a mobile device as a retailer in the shop, what should that person know?
So now we're kind of moving away from the Web Accessibility Directive a little bit more into the European Accessibility Act, I guess, which is totally fine. So yes, this is also, we had this a little bit in mind during the workshop. We were still trying to focus ourselves to websites and apps, but we know that requirement is actually specifically important for things like EAA and actually hardware products being sold. Now, I don't know, it needs a lawyer. Is the act of selling in a shop actually e-commerce? I'm not exactly sure. The mobile device potentially falls under the EAA, I guess, as a communication device, but the in-store shopping. But yeah, these are interesting questions that actually, as I mentioned earlier, there's another standard that is actually still in the early phases. And so a lot of these discussions are happening in that other group as well. So this discussion here that was in Brno will not only feed into the EN301549, but potentially into this other discussion as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Shadi. And I think we need to wrap up. I promised to say something about the upcoming events, and that is when we will have the Web Accessibility Directive anniversary in September. That is always around the 23rd of September, which was kind of when that law was applicable in all the member states. So it will either be the workshop will be on that. So we may be 22nd, 23rd, or 23rd, 24th. We don't. It's a question about the venue, but you're always welcome to Brussels to discuss that, and then we will continue to have these workshops, of course, throughout the years. I think we still have quite a few requirements to go through, and as soon as the new version of the EN301549 is published, then we may have even more things to discuss. So this is an ongoing thing. And I should also have told you or said that in this core group of people who are kind of working with this and pushing this forward, there are also two other people that are supporting us who happen not to be in Brno this time, but who have been facilitating other workshops and are working together with us. And that's Ditlev Fischer from DS in Germany and Wilco de Vries from DQ in the Netherlands. So this is the whole group, so to speak. And if you're interested in following the work on the EN301549, there is a GitLab channel that I will post in the chat for you. Hide mentioned that we are sometimes posting things there, comments or starting issues. And we are also, of course, making sure that whatever the conclusions from these discussions come, that they are also provided to the special task force and the different working groups in all the different standardization groups. So not only the EN301549, even if that is what we are kind of focusing on, as Shadi said, the results of what we are doing may end up in one of the other standards that are currently being developed and reviewed. So we will, there is a document with all of this, everything we said today and many of the other details that we will send out to everyone who registered for this webinar. And we will also look at the remaining questions and see if they think something that we should respond to. You will get that in the same thank you email. And with that, time is up, and I would like to thank today's speakers, who are also the facilitators, for all the time they have spent on this. And it was really a lovely workshop in Brno, and people were super happy. They're always very happy about this. This is one of the things that the most popular activities we have from IAAP EU side. And please join us for the next time we're doing this, and follow everything we do in LinkedIn and other channels. Thank you very much, and have a very nice rest of your day. Bye-bye.